WeAreDB. I'm Danielle, joined by Brenton.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for joining us for our honorable mention episode this month, as we take the opportunity to talk about a great film that just missed out on being on the IMDb's list of the best movies of all time. This month, rated at 8.0 on the Internet Movie Database by millions of film lovers from around the world, is Planet of the Apes. Released in 1968, starring Charlton Heston as the lead, Planet of the Apes is a science fiction film set on a mysterious planet in the year 3978. I didn't realize it was that far in the future.
Yeah.
Based on the 1963 short story by Pierre Boulle called La Planète des Singes, the film is written for the screen by Michael Wilson and Rod Serling and is directed by Academy Award-winning director Franklin J. Schaffner. This is the first installment of the Planet of the Apes series, which consisted of 5 original films from 1968 to 1973, a television series, an animated series, a series of comic books, and a remake movie and reboot series of currently 3 films.
So quite a bit, and this is the first one.
I was going to say, that's a lot of apes.
Yeah, yes. That was quite a running joke for quite a while there, that they were just running this series into the ground.
I want to make a note that La Planète des Singes is actually the planet of the monkeys, as far as I know. Like, I don't know that singe actually translates adequately to apes.
Do they have a series of different words for apes and chimpanzees and things?
They probably do. It's just that I thought monkeys were a type of ape.
I don't think so, because monkeys have tails.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying, because these were apes. You know, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans are apes. Monkeys, as far as I know, aren't apes. So that's kind of changing the...
A little bit. From what I've read about that original novel, it didn't sound like a good storyline, and they changed quite a bit of it. Like, it's loosely based on that storyline.
It's a planet full of ape-like things, and they changed it.
Yeah, a lot of the things weren't the same.
And that's the only original thread.
No, there was the idea that it was several thousand years in the future, and these spaceships landed on the planet, and they realized that it was a Planet of the Apes, but it wasn't really what you saw there. And from what I read, it was kind of like, I don't know, sometimes it was better and sometimes it was worse from what they took from the original material. And also, interesting note, Rod Serling, who wrote this, also worked on It's a Wonderful Life from 1946, which we had an episode release about 4 days ago. I'd recommend go listening to that if you like old classic films. It's a Wonderful Life is a very good one.
Yeah. I want to establish when we are getting into spoilers, because I think this is one where it's pretty spoiler heavy.
I kind of just want to start this off with the blanket spoiler warning that you know what happens at the end of this. I mean, it's an over 50 years movie, and this is one of those spoilers where it's like Darth Vader's Luke's father. Like, everyone knows it. I was so surprised that I kept this spoiler from you.
Yeah.
So this is your spoiler warning. We continue right now.
No spoiler free. Sorry, but like, okay.
And can I just say, like, what's the statute of limitations when it comes to movie spoilers? There was someone on Instagram that I was following on the WeAreDB film podcast Instagram, who, in the post, without even reading anything, just looking at it, it completely spoiled what happened in Avengers Endgame. And I commented and I said, spoilers? What are you doing? And he said, well, if you haven't seen Endgame yet, then it's really your own fault. And I'm like, that movie's been out for 2 months.
Like, that's...
Is the limitations really expired on a movie like Endgame?
Not
especially
really.
Especially with such big spoilers. I'm just going to go on a tangent here. Like, real quick. Whenever I go to the movies, there is this... It's like a insurance ad or a superannuation or something.
Yep.
That just posts a bunch of spoilers. For the next 30 seconds, I'm going to spoil, like, Fight Club and Empire Strikes Back and Harry Potter. So just the spoiler warning. There's this commercial that comes on during the trailers, and it's just like... Edward Norton was Tyler Durden all along, and Snape kills Dumbledore, you know, and Darth Vader is Luke's father, you know. And then it flashes up that it was Earth all along in the Planet of the Apes. And at the end, the tagline is like let movies surprise you, not life or life insurance or some shit. And I'm just like, whoa, what the fuck are you doing? Like, it flashes up like 7 different massive movies and their spoilers just so that it can get a fucking gag at the end. Fuck you. Like, that pisses me off. I've seen it a handful of times, and I don't go to the movies that often, maybe once a month. And I just think those sort of things aren't really up for grabs. Like, you just ruined Fight Club. Fight Club has a great twist ending.
I didn't know
it leads up to it. Like, I don't want to go into Fight Club, having never seen it, knowing what the ending is. Fuck you.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I just feel like people are way too casual when it comes to spoilers on these things, and you can never make the assumption that people have seen it. Yes, I know that Fight Club is 20 years old, but we could have people listening to this who are younger than that.
Exactly.
And I think that's unfair to anyone who really, truly wants to get into a movie completely raw and experience it the way that it was meant to be experienced in the first place. Endgame has already been spoiled for you, and we're watching through the MCU again so that we can do an episode on it. And you're watching we're going through the Iron Man movies and the Captain America movies, and you're just watching them just being like, well, I already know what happens now. This sucks. Like, I'm really sorry that was spoiled for you. That was in a fucking news headline.
Yep.
It's just like, here's the spoilers for Endgame in the fucking headline. Like, you Googled the actor, and it popped up as a trending article.
Yeah.
You weren't even looking for Endgame or Endgame news or anything, and it's just like, people are way too casual, and it pisses me off. I'm very glad that a movie as old as this, with a twist ending like this, was kept innocent and pure. I was very surprised that I managed to keep this spoiler from you. What did you think about the ending?
It cleared up a lot of questions I had, because, so the fact that, I was watching through this and I was seeing what was happening, I'm like, if this was Earth, surely there would be a historical record. Like, how is it that they're doing exactly the same thing that humans do now in terms of looking at archaeological record? So first off, learning that the planet of the apes is Earth. We're on Earth still. They go around for a bunch of years in space, they land back on Earth. Ta-da!
Well, because essentially their spaceship was programmed to come back to Earth, and they thought it malfunctioned when it didn't take them back to Earth, quote unquote. But it was right all along. So,
why were they in space at all?
I didn't understand the premise of that. I believe the storyline in the novel, at least, was that they were meant to be scouting out a planet near Betelgeuse, the gas giant in Orion. And they do mention that they think that they're on a planet in the constellation of Orion. But I don't really remember. I think they mentioned something about wanting to find another habitable planet and repopulate or something like that.
Yeah, because the female crew member who died, she had what a role. Your face is there. You're not even awake. She's asleep, and then she's dead.
The main female character is dead in the first 3 minutes.
Yeah. She was supposed to be the new Eve, right?
I think they just tacked that in there because it wasn't. Okay. It was just like, we have to put these astronauts in space for some reason, going out to find a planet.
Yeah.
And the thing is that they were traveling close to the speed of light, which, going off the theory of relativity, changes the way time affects things.
Yes.
So you see right at the beginning, they've been in space for about 6 months, but 700 years has gone by.
Earth time.
And Earth time, yes.
Yeah.
It's just the way that it's affected. So by the time they get back, they've only aged 18 months, but over 2,000 years has gone past. And that's essentially the premise.
Yeah.
So there was quite a lot of little inconsistencies and things that you were picking up on, just being like, as if, there's no way you could do that. But you're saying this whole Earth twist at the end fixes some of those?
Some of them.
I think definitely the fact that they're speaking English is a bit, okay, but I'll excuse it because it's a movie.
That's the thing, is I'm like, as if, I said, right? Before I knew that this was Earth, I was like, as if they're gonna land in some faraway planet that happens to be at, the exact same, stage of development in terms of culture and language and everything, and they're speaking fucking English. That's so coincidental.
Well, I was even thinking about the distance away it is from its respective sun, it's got water, it's got air to breathe, it's got the same gravity. I was thinking more of those things the first time I saw it, because I've seen this 3 times. I should probably mention that I have seen this a few times.
Okay. Like, that to me was kind of inconsequential, the fact that it's okay, because it's like, the likelihood that elements and all that exist in a similar way that we could respond to, like, that makes a little bit, like, scientific probability makes a little bit more sense to me.
Especially since they were aiming for a planet with the similar life forms and things and characteristics.
Exactly.
Of Earth.
I'm like, they would be tracking that. They would know where those are at this point if they're setting an expedition to it. Like, that makes sense. But I'm like, fuck you, they don't speak fucking English.
That one
you
is the one thing, and I think it's forgivable, because you wouldn't have a movie, really.
It is. But I thought there was even going to be some sort of, like, interpretation and learning native language. No, they just spoke English right from the get-go.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yep.
Okay. But the fact that it is Earth makes a little bit more sense. Also, is the premise that they're going backwards? Like, they're devolving?
No, I don't think so. Because, why would you say that?
Are we devolving back into monkeys, or is it that humans have become unable to speak and apes have further evolved?
Apes have evolved, yeah. Everyone's still evolving. I don't remember the reason for why humans can't speak exactly. It's not a biological thing. It's a neurological thing.
Okay.
And I don't think that's explained there, but I don't think anyone's devolving. I think you're pulling that from at the end of the movie where he's talking about going back in time is the more civilized society.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think so, because I was looking at it and I'm like, well, these apes are of similar intelligence and cultural standing as humans, but there's inconsistencies there. So they're advanced in science, but they're like so primitive in architecture. Like, I'm really looking into this like with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, but I think that's depicted really quite well.
Okay.
I think that's reflective of, like, say, the Middle Ages. They didn't have a very good understanding of science. Or do you think they did? Because they were doing, like, brain
they did.
surgery
They
and
were
stuff.
doing lobotomies.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, I think that's just because it doesn't line up with exactly how things worked in our culture and our history doesn't mean that another race after us would have it in the exact same order.
Fair enough. I'm just thinking, like, I was looking at it, and to me, it seemed like certain things... It seems to me like throughout history, and I hear what you're saying, certain things progress at similar speeds, and it just looked like they were way ahead in some places and way behind in others. So it also makes more sense now, because
I think that was a matter of perspective.
Yeah. What is with this focus on religion? I mean, it was meant to be mirroring society, right? Because they're using religion to mask a history that they don't want society to know about, right?
Why would you say that? You said, why is there a focus on religion when literally all of humankind for the last 50,000 years has been on religion?
No, I know. I was looking at it in terms of the movie, and I'm just like, why are they pushing this so much? Oh, because of the history. Like, by the end of the movie, it made more sense. You know what I mean?
I think the point of the movie is highlighting how it's got a lot to say about how humans treat animals. It's got, like, a lot to say about religion and hiding or falsifying facts. There's a lot on evolution. And it's basically just saying how long people were ignoring the truths in order to not be killed or imprisoned.
Absolutely.
Because all throughout history, you probably have these brilliant people who could clearly see the truth, but if they exposed it, they themselves would be accused of, like, heresy.
Galileo. Literally
prime example.
Sentenced to house arrest for saying that the Earth went around the sun. No, absolutely. Like I said, I was looking at it very literally because this was one where it presented a lot of themes and a lot of specific details that were very good to analyze very specifically. So, like I said, I'm going through it very, very harshly because it put itself in that position. I agree with you. It's a higher concept, you know, it's presenting this alternate reality, right? And it's just, it takes till the end
to pay off.
Yeah, to sit back and say, oh, okay. You like it?
Yeah, I think it has a lot more to say on the themes and the concepts more than it does grounding it in reality. And I think that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as long as you know that going into it.
Well, yeah. Well, at least you see the end. If you watched like all of this except the end, or without understanding it, you'd be like, "What the fuck am I watching?" And
You'd
then
be
you
like,
realize
"This is
that,
dumb." Yeah.
and you're like, "Oh, okay, this is actually quite an interesting reflection on history and science and culture." And I just think it's an interesting story to tell, and I think it's quite a unique one.
This one made me...
Did you enjoy this movie? I didn't even ask you. What do you think of this?
This one made me curious to see the reboots. It really
Okay.
did. Because, like, cinematographically, it was shit.
I'll agree with
like-
that. I didn't realize the first few times I watched this. The cinematography in this is pretty bad.
Like, even for the 60s, like, it was bad.
Yeah. Those zoom shots, man, that's just like zooms right in
There's,
from
like-
across a landscape.
Like, spinny and fucking wiggly camera, no tripod, and upside down shots. For what reason? Like, it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah, there was a few in there. It was meant to make you feel hectic or something, but it's like...
Yeah, it's like,
turn the
you
camera
can do
upside
that
down.
without making me throw up, thanks.
Yeah. No, definitely. When the ship was crashing in the beginning, I'm like, this is going to make me feel sick.
Yeah.
This movie was actually nominated for 2 Oscars, including Best Music Score, which I think was a fucking terrible music score, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it also got an honorary Academy Award for its contribution to the motion picture, which is fair enough, and for makeup, which I think was very good and deserved.
Yeah.
So that aside...
Did I like it?
No.
Not really. Like, I didn't mind it. I'm glad I watched it.
Okay.
But,
Oh, that's something.
like, again, not much happened in terms of plot points. It took a long time to hit, like, maybe 5 key plot points.
Yeah, it took like at least half an hour before you even see the apes of a 2-hour movie. That's a quarter of the way through. It's basically just a story piece just reflecting on those things that we were talking about before. We're talking about culture and science and how these things are interpreted. So I don't think it's meant to be this big fantastical sci-fi movie. But it's, like I said, it's relying more on the themes and the concepts than it is on those visuals and the camera angles and things. And I think that's why it's been beloved. Like this story, like I said, with the sequels and the reboots and everything, people really took off with this concept and ran with it.
Yeah.
I've seen references for this so much, which is actually why I'm surprised that you were able to be saved from the spoilers.
Oh, I'm clueless. We know that.
Can I go into more on the sequels and the reboots and talk about things?
I just want to talk about the fact that it's based on a short story. I would really like to read that original short story because I think of all of everything that they've done with it, I think that will be still the best essence of this story is the original.
I'm usually of that mind as well. I haven't read this short story. I think short stories are adapted into films a hell of a lot better than novels. Or series of novels into a single movie. Because it's just the right length. They can be, yes. The building blocks are there from the beginning more so than a novel that you have to cut things out and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I even think the first Harry Potter plays more like a short story. That's a very small book. So I'm probably one of the only people in the world who have actually seen all 9 of these films.
You're nuts.
Because I've explained before that usually when a sequel or a reboot of a long-running franchise comes out, I like to start from the very beginning and work my way up. So I have context when I watch the sequels and the reboots.
So you've
That's
seen
just
like
me.
all of the original, like
Yes.
everything, Planet of
Yes.
the Apes, old, new, and in between.
I haven't seen the TV series though. I think it only ran for like 3 seasons or so. It was only 40 episodes
Righto.
or something like that. So I quite like it. I love going on these journeys. I really do, because then
Yep.
I can look back and I can tell you which ones are good, which ones are bad, what are these new references, what are they shouting back to, and it gives me a well-rounded idea of pop culture.
Well, I'll even tell you now, like, go watch it. I didn't like it, but I think you should still watch it.
I think you will absolutely enjoy the reboot better because you've seen this now.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see, like, a part
How
of
they do
it
it?
too. Yeah, because a part of it too is that storytelling and cinema in the 60s was very different. Like, even the way you convey a story.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be better. You know what I mean? They're going to do it from a contemporary perspective and be able to convey the same story in a different way. And I'm curious to see how they do that. that said, yeah, I agree with you. Context. You need original context. And, like, there's nothing wrong with having an educated opinion on that. Yeah, I saw that and I didn't like it, and here's why.
Yes, I would agree with that. So the first one was from 1968, called Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston. The second one, so they smashed out 5 of these in 5 years. So you can't imagine the high quality of these things. So the next year there was Beneath the Planet of the Apes. I'm going to spoil all of these, just even the reboots. I'm just going to everything's on the table.
Should I listen?
Yes.
Okay.
This is fine. Okay.
All right.
Beneath the Planet of the Apes was the sequel to this, direct sequel. And it's probably up there in the top 5 of the worst films I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, this movie is terrible. People who say that they love the original Planet of the Apes movies are not referring to the second one. Oh my god. So the premise basically is there's a second astronaut ship that lands on Earth like a year later after Taylor's original ship, because he's looking for their first one, their Taylor's ship. Which is complete bullshit, because it's like, it's been 2,000 years, you happen to go through the exact same, like, process and time warp to be able to get there 1 year later, whatever. So he's going along, and they're obviously on the east coast of America, that's where the Statue of Liberty is.
Yep.
And I believe,
Can
like,
I
the
also
Earth...
just say, they're like, we weren't programmed to land in the water, but Earth changes, so it makes sense that they did land in the water. Anyways, go ahead.
I think there's a lot of things in there that do make sense now that you know it's Earth.
Yes.
The Earth like cracks open basically, and Charlton Heston, Taylor, and Nova, they fall in, I believe, and they get captured by. So there are still humans that aren't these primitive beings. They're living in the subways of New York, and they have like telepathic powers. So they're like this advanced race of humans that are living in the subway, and they're worshipping a nuclear bomb. They have like a religion based around this nuclear bomb. And the only thing I liked out of it was a good depiction of like the cool like New York subway, the way that the set design, I guess it was. What would it look like 2,000 years later underground? So it's like kind of this desert scene above, and then you go underneath, and it's like some of it's still intact.
I'm picturing like Mad Max.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a fucking bullshit movie, and I hated it.
Well, again, like all I'm picking out of that is that
it didn't really have anything to do with apes.
I know, high concept, like, we've destroyed the Earth because of our, like, obsession with nuclear war.
Essentially,
like,
that was kind of the point that the first one was getting at, is that we were destroyed by nuclear war. So at the end of this, they end up actually activating the nuclear bomb that they're worshipping and blow up the entire planet into crumbs.
But then how are there any more?
Exactly. So, the next one, the third one, is called Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And it is Zira and Cornelius, the 2 scientists from the first one. Apparently, they were able to leave the planet of the apes in Taylor's spaceship that they'd fished out of the water before the planet was exploded in the last one. And somehow, in a time warp, they went back to 1973. In Washington, D.C.
No.
I know, right? And they had a kid called Milo.
So they're talking monkeys who go back to 1973.
Yes, and they landed in a spaceship, and you've got Zira and Cornelius in the 70s of Washington, D.C., and they interact with the scientists there. It's kind of like a reverse role sort of thing. Essentially, by the end of that movie, Zira and Cornelius are dead. They get shot by scientists, I believe it is, and Milo, which gets renamed Caesar, he leads on from that point forward. The fourth one was Conquest of the Battle of the Apes. That's basically just telling the story as to how apes were able to even overrun the planet in the first place, which their understanding, what they depicted there was humans used apes as slaves and pets until apes got sick of it and they revolted and they grouped into these societies and they managed to overthrow the planet. I watched all of these. You look on your face.
I'm just like, this sounds so Animal Farm. I'm like, this sounds like the most shittest thing I've ever heard about in my life. I'm like, I'm not watching that.
No, you're not.
I'm not watching any of it.
And the fifth one was Battle for the Planet of the Apes. And it's basically, this is kind of like leading up to the beginning of the first one, where it's just like setting up this hierarchy of apes and humans, and Caesar, Cornelius's son, is leading the revolt, and I believe he has a son as well, which is Cornelius as well. So it's like 3 generations of apes. So yeah.
Wait. So apes overrun the planet because apes from the future come back and have a kid who leads the ape revolt, which leads to his parents being born.
I could be wrong in that, but if I'm right, that is, I understand the paradox in that. I could be wrong. I can't remember. It has been a few years.
Right.
It was when the second reboot came out that I'm like, I actually really love the second reboot. So I'm like, I kind of want some context now. And that's when I went back, which I think was 2014 or 2015. So it wasn't too long ago.
So you watched through all of them after...
I watched through all of them within a week. All 9 of them.
After watching the first 2 reboots?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, the 9th one hadn't come out yet, so it was only 8 at that time. I quite liked Battle. The 5th one, I think the 5th one was the second best out of the 5. Conquest was then the next one. I quite liked Conquest and Battle more than the premise that I'm giving. Beneath is definitely the worst, and Escape is the second worst. And then you get to the 2001 remake from Tim Burton that has I know, right? It has Charlton Heston in there as playing an old ape as like a homage or whatever to the original. I think Linda Harrison, who plays Nova, she's also got a cameo in there.
I was going to say, you can't see it, but I just did a massive eye roll.
You could probably hear it though.
Ugh, God.
I could hear your eye roll. Yeah, it's just Tim Burton and his remakes. I've spoken about it before. This movie is garbage. It's probably the second worst out of the whole series, Beneath being the first one. It's still fucking bad though. Like, Mark Wahlberg is the main guy. It doesn't follow along with any of the storyline, really. Yeah, anyway, so there was a remake. And then we come to the reboot trilogy, which currently only has 3. And that starts off called Rise of the Planet of the Apes is the first one. And that's basically the story of these apes that basically they're doing testing on them to enhance their brain capabilities, their brain functionality, which makes a hell of a lot more sense than, like, let's have apes as pets and slaves and then they overthrow it. It's like, no, we were doing testing on them. That's why they're brilliant.
So they're kind of going back and redoing the, I want to say, origin story.
Yes.
Okay.
They're setting it up. It's not like, let's just skip to the Planet of the Apes.
They're not going on and on with this forever, are they?
No.
Okay, so they're going back and kind of revamping it.
So the first one starts in modern times.
Make a little more sense.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the second one is called Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and it's kind of them establishing their colonies and things. And the third one is called War for the Planet of the Apes. And at the end of that movie, you see the apes go off into the desert to colonize and build a city out in the desert. So that's basically setting up, like, it's basically a prequel trilogy. I think this Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy is one of the best examples of a reboot, remake, sequel that I have ever seen. I'm trying to think what else might be in that discussion. Maybe the Star Trek movies, the new ones, they're really, really good.
They were really good.
Maybe Christopher Nolan's Batman's, but apart from that, like, I really quite like the new Planet of the Apes movies. I think it's done very well. And there's quite a lot of references in there that you wouldn't pick up on unless you'd seen the originals.
This discussion makes me curious to see all of the originals, but I also don't want to sit through like 12 hours of hot garbage.
Just listen to what I just said. That's why I did it for the audience, just to save you having to watch it. Yeah, it's just more for the background. Just read a plot line on the IMDb or something if you're interested, but don't. Or watch a recap or something. So I just wanted to reference, just real quick, Andy Serkis plays the main monkey from the reboot trilogy, and his character's name is Caesar.
Yep.
Who is also the character, obviously, who started it from the originals, and that's why he gets his name. In the very first one, Caesar's mum, she was the one who was doing the testing on, they were doing these testing on, they call her Bright Eyes, which is what Zira calls Taylor, Charlton Heston's character in this, and that's what that's a reference to. In the third one, War for the Planet of the Apes, there is a mute girl, because you're starting to see humans not being able to talk in that third one. Mm-hmm. And she finds a nameplate for a Chevy Nova, so they just call her Nova, which again is a reference to the first one. A lot of people probably didn't pick up on that one unless you'd seen the original. And then the very first one, I'm going to, real quick spoilers, there is a point where Caesar, it's very well done. He basically talks for the first time in the same sense that Taylor talks for the first time in this original Planet of the Apes movie, and I think it's awesome. The first time that you see Taylor talk for the first time after being injured in Planet of the Apes, I think it's great. And it's got that iconic line, he's like, "Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape!" And I think that's actually quite an awesome scene. I'm like, oh shit, you know? And there's a very similar scene to that in the first one. So there's quite a few things in there play homage. I think it's quite a respectful reboot. And they're probably also going to do more sequels, especially now that 20th Century Fox is a Disney property and Disney's not exactly one to let a franchise die or whatever.
Yeah. Going back to that first instance, the whole time I was watching this, I'm like, dude, there's so many ways you could communicate non-verbally than by, like, trying to strangle the fucking cue cards and pen off her.
I feel like they were trying to depict that he was trying, and I think that's
they
just
didn't
passed
do it
off
very
to
well.
1960s sci-fi movies, because he was trying to write in the sand and
just sign, like, gesturing without doing any kind of signing. I'm like, just wiggle your finger in the air like a pen.
Yeah,
so you
maybe.
want the pen, like. I don't know, I was just very frustrated with how that was depicted, because I'm like, again, there are ways you could get attention and show that you're intelligent.
Yeah.
But you chose not to.
I think going back to the way that these apes are depicted in Planet of the Apes, I think the clothing and the architecture and the culture of the apes, it's good design, like it feels unique. You know, you've got these apes segregated by their color of their uniform into like apes and chimpanzees and orangutans. You've got this hierarchy there. I think the clothing doesn't look like anything that I've seen before. The markings on them, it feels like some sort of ancient civilization, I guess.
So you know how they kind of had emblems on their shirts, and it was kind of, they were present around the buildings and things too. So the buildings reminded me of the Flintstones a little bit.
Yeah.
But the emblems on the clothing looked like ancient Aztec or Mayan.
Yep.
So I'm with you there. Like, to take inspiration from that would be, like, subconsciously pointing you back to that kind of direction, which is very old. So I can see why they would have made a choice about infusing that kind of influence into the clothing.
Which... weren't the Aztecs and the Mayans quite an advanced civilization in the sense of, like, science and things?
Science, math, astronomy, yeah.
Astronomy, definitely.
Yeah.
But then they were also living primitive, quote-unquote, in our eyes. So you saying that I don't think that this culture would be this way, and I'm like, well, look at the Aztecs and the Mayans.
Yeah, yeah.
I was actually very excited to talk about this one because I quite like it. I think it has a lot to actually say in its meanings. And I wanted to talk about a breakdown of the series, which I did, going through the sequels and things to help people understand that backstory.
I like what it had to say. It just didn't say it very well. You know what I mean?
No, I would understand that.
That's all I have to say.
See, this is the kind of scenario where it's like, I think that a remake or a reboot is a good idea, you know? Like, that's not a bad idea. It's when there's a series that's like, you didn't do this just the right way, or it was forgotten or something. Yeah,
you had a really good premise to build on.
Yeah.
And based on what you've said, they've done it in a really cool way, a really interesting way.
We'll get to it eventually.
Too bad, though, that, like, right from the word go, so the second movie, you know exactly what's ultimately going to happen. You know?
Yeah.
Kaboom.
Yeah. I really quite liked that reveal at the end. I think it was really quite brilliant, because that was definitely an aha moment for you, wasn't it? You were like, oh shit, like that actually changes quite a lot.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah.
Also, with that ending, he gets down on his knees. I've seen the clip before of watching it. And he says, damn you blew it up. And I always thought, watching that without seeing the movie, that he was referring to the planet, or New York. You know, they blew it up and they destroyed civilization, you idiots.
Yep.
But once I watched the movie, I'm like, oh, he's talking about the evidence in the cave. You blew up the evidence to show that this was Earth all along.
I don't know. I don't know.
Because they were trying to hide the actual history there, so they're going to go back to their civilization and keep going on with their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
And I just think that changes quite a lot once you actually see what the scene just before that, when they blew up the cave, and he's going down the beach. That's what I interpreted from that whole "you blew it up" line. And I love the use of the Statue of Liberty. because that's a symbol of our culture. Like, how could you possibly have another culture that has recreated this statue exactly? And I think it might survive the testament of time, 2,000 years. It's obviously dinged up and sunken into the sand at this point, but I think that's a good symbol to make that reveal.
Yeah.
What other things that are man-made that represent us as people, as a culture, that might stand the test of time?
Like as we are contemporarily now.
No, just like, what is it that humans have done that our replacements might see long after we're gone? And I was thinking about maybe Mount Rushmore? Because there's these faces carved into the actual mountain. Yeah. That's not going away in a hurry.
Because we've got a lot of man-made things that have stood that amount of time. Like the pyramids or Aztec and Mayan ruins in Mexico. Those are all well over 2,000 years old.
Yes. In order to make that reveal at the end, you needed a symbol that would last for a long time, and it had to represent humans, and it couldn't be replicated, and people know exactly what it is at once. And I think there's very few artifacts that you could have possibly used, and I think the Statue of Liberty is a great choice.
Yeah, no, it's good.
And to think that this movie came out before this whole, like, space race thing. Like, no one had landed on the moon when this movie came out.
Hadn't they?
No, it was 68. It was the year before.
Oh.
Not the first one.
Oh, okay. Alright.
And I kind of liked how the masks were quite emotive. I just wanted to say that. You'd think that you'd be restricted by the masks with their emotive abilities.
They were quite emotive. Like, you could see there was not a lot of word forming capabilities. It kind of looked like a sock puppet in that way, but you do a lot of emotional conversation with your eyes, and that was definitely considered in that costume design. It was relayed very well. And I like, too, how there was a point there when she put him and Nova in the back of that cart and said, most apes see all humans as looking the same.
Mm.
And they made a point of making each character actually very identifiable. So you had the three orangutans sitting on the council there, and they all looked very different because they were three different people playing three different characters who happened to be orangutans, but they all had, like, different shaped eyes, and some had different hair, and some had, you know what I mean? So they made a point of making sure that personality was conveyed. So I thought that was interesting.
Okay. I think it is a goofy, dumb ape movie, and I told you that going into it just to give you a warning. But I think it has actually quite a lot to say, and I quite like the themes that are running through it. And I think the reboots explain everything excellently, so I'd recommend going to see those reboots. This movie is definitely great for understanding pop culture and where we've come from.
I was going to say, go see this one to get your pop culture reference fix. It was silly, but yeah, it'll do that for you. Yeah, it was okay. It was fine. I didn't like it.
That's okay. That's okay. I like it.
No, it is fine. Well, like I say, I would still recommend people go see it. There are movies where, I'd sit down and watch them, and I'd be like, well, I'll never get those 2 hours of my life back. And this is not one of those movies. Like, just because I didn't like this movie doesn't mean that you shouldn't watch this movie. It was still an important movie.
Did you have high hopes going into it, or did you have realistic hopes?
I had higher hopes.
Okay.
I was surprised at how poor quality the filmmaking was.
Okay, yeah.
Because I have seen a lot from this period, and I'm like, you could do better than that.
Yeah. I think if you're listening to this and you haven't seen the movie, then you'd have a pretty good picture as to what to expect. Your hopes are low enough that when you do go see it, you'd be like, oh, that's not actually that bad. Yeah. I think you got to find that balance there. So.
Yeah.
So next month's honorable mention will be Apocalypto, that Mel Gibson movie from 2006. I think it's very underrated, and maybe a lot of people listening to this haven't heard of that, and I think it deserves some sort of discussion. I think it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Apocalypto.
We have been Danielle and Brenton this week. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, check us out on all the socials, and comment on SoundCloud. And until next week, thanks for listening.
Get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape!